someone's sharing that with me for a reason. Maybe I don't know what it is now. They don't even know what it is now. But I think I should take note of it and give it some credence.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to Growth Ready, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high-performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome in Global Chairman of Horwath HTL and personal branding expert John Fareed, who knows firsthand the power that commitment, investment, and consistency can have in providing the ground for growth to happen, so long as we are ready to seize opportunities when they present themselves. This episode is brought to you by Scribe, the workflow AI platform that automatically turns any process into a beautiful shareable guide in seconds. Say goodbye to manual screenshots or typing out step-by-step instructions and join the already 4 million people working 15 times faster with Scribe. Get started today at scribehow.com. That's SCRIBEHOW.com. Hello there, and welcome back into the most recent installment of the Growth Ready podcast. I am truly excited to be welcoming someone today that I had the pleasure to get to know at a recent conference, and that is somehow the way that I get folks to come on this show sometimes. I'll just start having a conversation, and my curiosity alarm goes off a little bit, and then folks like John Fareed end up on the show. But John, before we go any further, maybe into that origin story of our relationship and obviously your journey, I would love to just learn from you. What does it mean to you to be growth ready?
So I thought about this, Steve, and I do have an answer for you. It's pretty simple, and it served me well. And that is, be open in all things, be lucky in all things. I have found that by being open to things that initially I had a bad gut reaction to, or an immediate, oh, maybe that's not for me, but being open has really, really helped me grow, both personally and professionally. So I really focus on that. It's something that I teach all my people about, in terms of, yeah, be open in all things, be lucky in all things. It's amazing.
Yeah, I am so interested to get into the lucky part of that too, because that's one of those words. It's one of those words that typically comes with a whole bunch of context, and we will get to that at some point. But I love where you've immediately taken us with this notion of open-mindedness. It is a concept that's come up on the show before, but I'm just curious, when you look at your journey, John, like, how has open-mindedness served you up to this point?
Well, there are many things that I've done in my life and career, more importantly, that I would have never thought, hey, I want to do that, or I want to go in that direction, had someone else not brought it up as an opportunity, and in some case nearly forced it upon me. Um, and I'm happy that occurred, but very often, that's how it's shaped my journey, is that someone said, hey, you know what? You'd be really good at this, or this is a great opportunity. You should look at it. And I mean, from eighth grade on, if I go forward, I grew up in a small town in North Georgia, in the mountains of North Georgia. One high school still for the whole county. It's the biggest county in Georgia, very close, if not the biggest for sure. But I didn't want to bag groceries or pump gas or do something that I thought would be uh, mundane. Not that it was beneath me, but just I wanted something a little bit more. And my drama teacher, Jerry Worley, she came to me and said, "Hey, and this is in eighth grade. I needed money. I needed money." She said, "The local radio station, WLEJ and LJ, is looking for a disc jockey. Would you want to audition?" And I'm like, "Heck, that sounds awesome." And I went and auditioned. I met the owner of the station, Bob Schwab, at the time, and shortly thereafter, I was the afternoon drive time DJ at
Wow.
WLEJ for the rest of my high school career. And I think that's a great example of be open and be lucky.
Yeah. Firstly, Bob Schwab has to be a fictional name. That cannot be. I mean, that's just too good. It's too
I
good.
wish.
Bob
I
Schwab
wish.
owns a radio.
Yeah.
That's incredible. But something that I'm hearing though immediately, which I think is so important when you provide this kind of backstory, is that it sounds like the first time, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe there was moments that came before this, but it sounds like this first time, this first moment where someone said, listen, I've got an idea that I want you to be open to, and it sounds like it went successfully. How important was it when you look back now and think, okay, the first time someone asked me to be open minded and I stepped in willingly, it worked out pretty good for me?
I was massive. I mean, it really was because it changed my position, if you will, because we're going to talk about personal branding. It changed
Yeah.
my brand at the high school because before that, yes, I was in drama club, I was in chess club, I was in chorus, I was in band. I was just, I mean, chicks dig all of that, as you know, in high school, especially. So when I began working at the radio station, it kind of changed my positioning. All of a sudden, the kids are calling me in the afternoon after school to play their favorite, song,
Right.
and whatnot. So all of a sudden, I had a bit of a cool factor, albeit geeky, nonetheless. It was
Yeah.
it was a change for me. So yeah, it changed everything.
Yeah, no, and I love how you're able to even connect it to something that is such a important topic to us at that point in our lives. Like being cool is
Yeah,
so life and death at the in eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade. Like it really is. And even if it's not supposed to be, it just is. And there's no one can convince you otherwise at that age. And here you are alluding to the fact that you got this really good return on making this big commitment. I mean, it could have gone horribly wrong, right? It could have gone a completely different direction, and it was on a public platform, but you stepped into it willingly. It worked out. And suddenly now you're seeing that, hey, with a little open mindedness, but then with the willingness to step into the opportunity, there are good things that can happen just because I started with that open mindedness on the front end, right?
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a repeat, rinse and repeat cycle
Yeah.
to that in my life that we
Yeah.
can talk about.
Yeah, no, I would love to, and something that is apparent, and we're gonna get to this here is, you've been in positions since as early as, by the sounds of it, eighth grade, where not only have you been open minded, but you've been open minded in a way where people can see, people are exposed to the result of that open mindedness, and I'm curious, what was it that allowed you to maybe be so comfortable with this notion of like, not only am I going to step into opportunity, but I'm going to do it in a form of a public setting in many ways.
I don't know that that was part of a thought process. I think
Mm-hmm.
that was just the opportunity that was presented to me,
Mm.
and I accepted it. But some of it was public, and some of it was not, or some of it was in a sea of sameness.
Mm.
If we want to talk about that, I went into the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
as we can talk about, and that was a position where I'm in a sea of sameness, and I disappeared for months at a time, either to boot camp or school or whatnot, and that was less public.
Yeah, yeah, and so I love that you took us there. So talk to me about that concept, that sea of sameness. I really like that, like just this notion of what that might mean to a person.
Yeah, I mean, to be, I would need to give you some backstory because people
Yeah.
might think, okay, what from disc jockey to Marine? How did that happen?
Yes.
And quite honestly, I'm a first generation American on my
Hmm.
mother's side. My grandfather, who was Egyptian, was a fighter pilot in the RAF, and he'd worked his way up the ranks from fighter pilot to brigadier general, and then later became ambassador from the Arab League to Japan and the UN. And he was a formidable character, Steve. But back in those days, affluent, wealthy Egyptians sent their sons and daughters to university in the U.S. or Europe. And my grandfather secured a Rotary scholarship. He was a lifelong Rotarian,
Yeah.
secured a Rotary scholarship for her to come here. And shortly after arriving, unchaperoned for the first time in her life, she met the school's, let's call it, equally naive 6'4", blonde-headed, blue-eyed basketball star from Alabama. Um, and one thing led to another, and boom, I was born. So as soon as my grandfather's devout Muslim found out about this, he more or less disowned my mom emotionally and financially, and that was tough for her,
Sure.
quite honestly. But lucky for me, I had two daughters, and I was the firstborn male in this, Muslim family who also carried his name,
Mm.
Fareed.
Yep.
So he sent me tickets every summer with my mom to go stay in Egypt and hang out with him and learn from him. And he essentially became a big father figure for me.
Mhm.
But part of this, I think that's important is for people to understand during those summers, my mom would remain shuttered in the back bedroom the whole summer. Only the women could visit her. I rarely got to see my mom during those summers until we were headed to the airport to fly home. And then when we got home, I'm living on food stamps and welfare, not all the time, but a lot in North
Mm.
Georgia. Hence the I need a job in eighth grade
Sure.
kind of thing. But the summer of my 18th birthday, my grandfather, he looked at me and said, "Where are you going to go to university?" And I said, "I'm not going to go to university. I'm going to be a professional magician."
Mm.
And he's like, "What? Like Hully Gully magic?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes in Arabic, Mishmaul, like, "Are you crazy? What are you
Right.
thinking?"
Right.
And I said, "No, I'm going to do that." And he says, "No, if you're not going to go to university, then you will go in the military, like me and my father, my grandfather."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, I don't have to do that in the States. We don't have mandatory military."
Mhm.
And he said, "No, you will, or I'll disown you." And I knew what that meant, Steve. For me, I had clear illustration of what that meant. So I looked at him and I said, "You've taught me a lot about business and relationships and negotiation. So I know that if I don't ask for something equally big of you in return, because going in the military is kind of a big commitment,
Yes, it is.
then you just won't respect me as a man."
Mhm.
So I looked at him, and I'm telling you, if he was with us today, Steve, he would tell you he thought for certain I was going to ask for a car, and he was ready to write that check. But I said, "I will go in the military if you agree to take mom back fully and completely."
Wow.
And it was a big lesson for me. He slammed his hand down on the table. He walked out because we were having a nice quiet lunch, walked out onto the lanai, and he lit himself a cigarette and poured himself a whiskey, which was a rare thing back in those days, especially in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And he came back in and he said, "Okay, I will do this." After looking at me, by the way, for 20 minutes in silence, but he taught me that great business lesson again of once you make your ask, you do not speak, right? First one to speak loses.
Mhm.
So he said, "I'll do it, but it has to be the Marines." And honestly, I didn't know anything. I was like,
Sure.
"Okay, that's a deal." So I agreed to go in the Marines, and he took my mom back the next day. It was amazing. It's a great, great story. We ended up at the country club in Gezira in Cairo, where they'd taken my mom to the hair salon and gotten her a new dress and brought the whole family together for lunch. It was a great day.
Mm.
But yeah, I ended up going in that Marines for 6 years, sea
Wow.
of sameness.
Yeah.
4 years active, 2 years reserve. But yeah, it
Yeah.
was a crazy time.
What an incredible story. And immediately the ability just to pivot from life lessons and business lessons. You have this very natural ability, and clearly it's come from years and years of being involved in so much of it. But I think what I always love about this show is that we can actually teach our listeners through something that is clearly an emotional, personal journey for your mother to go on and for you to be front and center as a key player in helping her get back to a place with her own family as you did. The fact that that was rooted so much in business acumen as well, and that awareness to it is at the same time. It's not just knowing the stuff, but it's living it. It's being disciplined enough at the age of 18 to look at your grandfather and just say, you know what? The one thing I have to be right now is a representation of what he's taught me. And that is what's going to speak volumes more than anything that I can possibly say. You know,
Steve, it's true. It paid off in spades. I mean, they ended up, my grandparents, Salah and Lulu Fareed, ended up
yeah.
moving shortly thereafter to North Georgia to be closer to us. And for
Oh,
the rest of
amazing.
their days, my mom and my grandfather were very close. And he was very proud of my Marine Corps uniform.
Mhm.
Sometimes I felt like he was more proud of it than I was.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I did, by the way, for the record, I did go on to do the magic.
Well, we're getting there, John, and I'm aware of that. And I think
Yeah.
what is whenever I have an opportunity to really highlight how we can take personal and professional and make it about just the human approach, because I think we just live in this time where something has to be put in one of those lanes. This is personal development. This is professional development. And to what you've highlighted here at that mere age of 18 is that the balance is there if we want to see it. And if we want to just allow it to be present, that at all times, a personal decision can be anchored in professional skill sets and vice versa. And that allows us to perform at the best version of ourselves as human beings. And for me, that's the growth process. When we embrace and acknowledge that, it's like, hey, both have an equal part at the table, both influence the outcome. It's when we probably put all our chips in one and ignore the other, is typically when we start to have issues and create problems for ourselves. And I think that's just truly incredible that at such a young age of 18 that you were able to find that balance.
I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate. And I give my grandfather a lot of credit because, back in the day as a young man, even he carried me everywhere. He took me to lunches and dinners and business meetings, and he took me shopping with him to how to buy a men's suit or a gentleman's timepiece or whatnot. But he taught me a lot of lessons, like the importance of long-standing relationships, like
Mhm.
when you and I met at the conference or whatnot, but also about negotiations and the concepts of face and honor. All of that was part of the package that I got from my grandfather over time. So I give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah. And what I also love about this is that we're 15 minutes in and we've not talked about what you do today. And currently, all the information our listeners have is that you were a eighth grade disc jockey who wanted to be a magician come 18. That was in a way forced to go into the
Yeah.
military for 6 years and then never gave up on his magician career, magician dream, by the sounds of it, 6 years on from the military. And before we even get to what you're doing today, I would love to hear how you even came, like 6 years after the military, you held on to this vision, this dream that you had, and you decided to still do something about it. So pick up the story there, and I'd just love to sort
Yeah.
of hear how you kept that flame alive, I guess.
I'll tell you, Steve. It was actually 4 years after because I had 2 years of
Oh,
reserve.
sure. Yeah.
So it was 4 years after. And I literally I had everybody told me that if you want to be a professional entertainer, you've got to go to Vegas or you got to go to LA, at least in that field. So as soon as I got out of the Marines, I moved to LA, and I decided I wanted to audition everywhere that I possibly could. I had saved some money and earned some money along the way busking, working streets in New Orleans. I took the train, which was stop and go a lot. It's a long
Right.
story, but um, by the time I got to Los Angeles, I was ready to audition everywhere.
Mhm.
And I tried comedy clubs, I tried everything, and I wasn't having a lot of luck. But the Mecca for magicians, kind of a base or a launch pad, even after they're very successful, they come back and touch this place, is the Magic Castle in Hollywood, California.
Hmm.
Still there today, very famous private club. And I would tell you that I had no luck getting into the Magic Castle. After a couple of months almost of living in LA and running low on shackles and thinking about, am I going to bartend? Am I going to wait tables? What am I going to do? Um, my concern was if I do that, then my nights will be gone. I won't be able to audition or go meet people in the clubs. So I called my drama teacher back in North Georgia. Her name's Jerry, as I said earlier. And I said, Jerry, I've really tried everything. I'm using my best stagecraft and salesmanship, and I just can't break in. And she said, well, before you go, if you're thinking of coming back home or whatnot, I want you to call my uncle Bob. He lives in LA, and he's a school teacher, and he would love to meet one of Jerry's kids. All right, and might be good for a meal. So she gave me his phone number. I called him at the school. It was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they had to go get him and bring him down the hallway. Bob says, "Oh my gosh, you're one of Jerry's students, one of Jerry's kids. I'd be happy to meet you." And we agreed to dinner that night. And he swings by in a beat up old AMC station wagon, picks me up, and we drive to his home. And his home was in this glorious neighborhood on Longwood Avenue. Park on the street. And as we walk into this home that is also just beautiful, there's a Mercedes and another beautiful car. And I said, "Wow, these are yours?" He says, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. We drive the beater. It doesn't bode well to drive a nice car and leave it on the street close to the schools. Trust me." I'm like, okay. We go in, we have a lovely dinner. His friend at the time was the chef at Andre's, which was a famous restaurant in LA, where they did the Folgers taste test commercials. Just a joke at the time. But I was like, wow, I'm meeting a celebrity. I saw this guy on TV.
Right.
And they said, so why are you here? I said, well, I'm trying to, break into the magic world here. And they said, okay, show us something. And I did. They had a pool house in the back of their house that they rented to me. He said, how much money do you have? I said, you're not going to believe me. I've got an Amtrak ticket home and $67. That's where I'm at. And he rented me the guest house for $67 a month with kitchen privileges, which I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So naturally, I went back to the hotel. We packed everything up. I called Jerry. I love your uncle. Here's what I'm doing, and whatnot. And within a month or so, I'm there. I'm still not having luck. And this is just going to bring it all home for you, Steve. I promise.
Yeah.
Is that somebody slips something under the door, and it's a neighborhood watch meeting. And I'm thinking, okay, I'll hold this for Bob because I'm there at the house. And Bob comes in and he looks at it, and he says, "Oh my gosh, I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner. This is at the Larson's home across the street." And I said, okay. So he says, "Come here." So we go look, and we look up at the Larson's home, and there's a wind directional of a rabbit in a hat. And there's a vintage Cadillac parked up front with the tags, California plates, say Magic on it. He said, "You're not going to believe this someday. I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner. They own the Magic Castle." And I'm
Oh
like,
my
what?
gosh.
So Bob sprang into action. We're going to go to this neighborhood watch meeting, and we went shopping and bought like a red sport coat. I'm talking red, Steve. All right, a black shirt, black jeans, and he's like, "We're going to make this work." We go to the neighborhood watch meeting, and he says, "This is Bob." He says, "I want you to start doing magic on their coffee table with everybody around while they're drinking and whatnot." So I started doing magic, and in walks Bill Larson, who's famous, and he sits across from me on the couch. He said, "So do something." So I did something. He goes, "So do you know who I am?" And I said, "No, I don't." Not the most ethical decision, but I'm
Right.
like, I honestly didn't know at the time that he was the guy, but
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was. And he said, "Have you heard of the Magic Castle?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've been trying to get an audition there." He goes, he calls over his brother Milt Larson, who I'd been calling like twice a day for, every other day for a while.
Right.
And Milt came over. He says, "Watch this guy." So I did a couple things, and he said, "What's your name?" And I told him, and Milt goes, "Oh my gosh, this guy's been calling me like crazy." And he says, "Well, I think you should give him an audition." Long story short, I got an audition. Next thing I know, I'm working at the Magic Castle, hanging out with the best of the best.
Yeah.
Met an agent. I got a job in, a nice gig in Vegas where I performed for years, and ended up going to Paris and London. And it was a great career
Wow.
for a long time. But again, I think that circles back to be open in all things, be lucky in all things.
Right.
Had I not listened to Jerry when she said, you need to call my Uncle Bob, and I just blown him off, that would have been, I don't think I would have, I think I would have ended up doing something entirely different, but it was truly magical.
It. Yeah. I mean, the sometimes, and I'll tell you this, like on this show, sometimes I have to be patient with people's stories, and I just sort of say like, okay, they're going to tell us a story right now, but John, I want you to know that is up there with one of the best stories in the 270 episodes of this podcast, mainly because to be able to tie in that opening answer to that question around growth ready, and to have a story that personifies what it means to be open-minded, and to understand that life requires a little bit of luck. It requires things happening at the right time for the right reason with the right people in the right room, etc. And what I am hearing from you, and I want to reinforce this for everyone listening, is that just because the luck doesn't come the first time you're open-minded doesn't mean you should stop being open-minded. Like that has come because there was so much open-mindedness that came before that's, quote unquote lucky break for you. And that just comes through in abundance in your life up to that point, but certainly within that story.
No, I agree, but I think it's also just recognizing the opportunity and going, hey, that sounds fun. Let's give that a shot. Or
Yeah.
maybe someone's sharing that with me for a reason, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe I don't know what it is now. Maybe they don't even know what it is now. But I think I should take note of it and really give it some credence.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really want to move now to this notion of personal brand, because how you've ended up at this point in your life, and you've been in Vegas for many years and you had this career around the world. Let's now talk about what you do today, because I think people will finally see, people will finally hear us connecting the dots in terms of maybe how you've ended up doing what it is you do today. So before we go more into the personal branding side of things, I'd love for you just to tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing currently.
Sure, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about how I got here,
Mm-hmm.
just so that
We will. We're going
there's
to go
some.
back. We're going to go back to that for sure. We're going to go back to that for sure.
Okay, so
Yeah.
today, as we're here, I'm global chairman of Horwath HTL,
Mm-hmm.
which is the world's largest hotel tourism and leisure advisory firm. We're the global leaders. We're in nearly 60 countries today, 250 senior partners around the world, and it's been a great journey. I've been doing this for some years. And I expect to be global chairman for another couple of years. I'm enjoying it, but it facilitates a lot of travel,
Mm-hmm.
and I also some great relationships and great experiences
Yeah.
with our partners around the world.
This episode of Growth Ready is sponsored by Scribe, the workflow AI platform that makes documenting and sharing processes truly effortless. Folks, when I look at my day, I'm constantly fielding questions from my team: how to pull reports, where to find files, how to set things up. And Scribe has been a total game changer in giving me that time I need back in my day. In a matter of seconds, Scribe turns my workflows into a beautiful, shareable guide, complete with screenshots and text instructions that ensures I no longer waste time in my day with the same repetitive tasks and conversations. Since using Scribe at Growth Ready, I've personally loved how it uses AI to do the work for me by following every click in real time. I can literally see my step-by-step guide being built by Scribe while I create training plans and document workflows to better serve my team. I've saved hours, folks, literally hours in my week by being able to create PDFs or shareable links that I can send to clients in an instant. So I'm asking you, I'm telling you, free yourself and your team from manually documenting processes and join the 94% of the Fortune 500 and 4 million people worldwide already using Scribe to work 15 times faster. So head to scribehow.com. That's SCRIBEHOW.com and start working faster today. It's one of the first things you shared with me when we first sat down with the work that you're doing today. And knowing more and more now about your story, I think it's why I almost wanted you just to present what it is you're doing now before we even get to that point of how you got to this to what you're doing today. Because I think sometimes what I love about your story up to this point is you can see some of the, and you put it so well in your previous response, is that you can see some of the seeds and you can see some of the evidence already knowing your story of how you may have ended up here. But something you just said there, which I think is so insightful, is that we sometimes don't necessarily need the reason to take that first step. We just need to have an understanding that someone or something is being presented to us in a certain way at a certain time for a reason that may not be obvious right now. And it will
Yeah,
eventually become clear as the years start to move on.
agreed. And some of it is just out of a desire to keep moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
moving on to the next thing, the next opportunity, the next learning experience. I think that's important too. And it keeps you from being stagnant.
Yes. Yes. Well, that desire to move forwards is clearly abundant throughout your life. But please now bring us up to speed with that moment of how, well, not that moment, that time, that period of time in your life where you've obviously been, you're around the world, you're established doing what you're doing in as a magician, and how you got to where you are today.
So yeah, this is another one of those crazy stories. There was a friend of mine that I had met at I think we met at the Magic Castle, but it might have been at a magic conference. Believe it or not, magicians have professional conferences, like all associations, right?
Right. Right.
Society of American Magicians, International Brotherhood of Magicians. It's an old story,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a great guy, Italian, good looking, unbelievably well dressed and coiffed at all times. Michael Delaberto, and he would come and he would just show up wherever I was, and we would do magic together, and we became friends. And one day I was in Baltimore, where his offices were, and he was part of an ad agency there. He was a partner. He was the creative director at Grey Kirk Van Zandt, big firm at the time. And they had this 2 stories in the World Trade Center building. And I called him. I said, "Hey, I'm in Baltimore. Do you want to get together?" He said, "Sure. Let's go get sushi for lunch." We went for lunch. But I was so impressed with him and his offices. And then that evening, we get in his beautiful Jag and we drive out to his beautiful home in the hills. And I met his beautiful wife and the 2 kids, right? I sound like a Talking Heads song here, but essentially, we had a lovely dinner, dogs, the whole deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, when the kids are going to bed and the wife says goodnight, we're sitting having a nice glass of whiskey. And he said, "So where are you headed next?" I said, "Well, I'm going on a cruise, around the Caribbean. I get to do 2 shows a night, 3 days out of the week. So woo, I'm all excited." He goes, "I would love to have your life, just the way you travel around and kind of do what you." And I'm like, all I could think of was, "Michael, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I would give anything to have your life because I don't have a home really worth speaking of. I've never had a long-term relationship worth speaking of. I have no kids, no dog. I'd happily trade places with you." And he looked at me, he says, "Are you kidding? You could do what I do all day long. You could do what I do." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, travel. You could consult and do marketing, advice, whatnot in the travel space. And I have no idea why, Steve, but for some reason, I really believed I trusted Michael. I knew him, and he was an intelligent individual. And 2 months later, I hung out a shingle under Fareed and Company, which was, again, maybe a bit of a stretch
Mm-hmm.
as a solo practitioner. And I started a consulting business. And shortly thereafter, I got my first client that had been a hotel that had hired me as Magic Boy.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and met with the general manager, Dan Batchelor, a great guy, and I ended up winning their business. And for 7 years, they were on retainer with me, added a hotel, and eventually I got into this business. But it was on that belief that I could do that. And before I knew it, I was, married, had a kid, had a dog, had a house, had a nice little Mercedes S-Class. Life
Right.
was good.
There you go.
Things turned around. But yeah, it was still long. I still had a long journey to go to get to this spot. And just to shortcut it, because I also want to talk about the personal branding aspects. Um, I met a gentleman by the name of Alex Gibson, who's still a dear friend of mine. I was just with him a couple months ago in Dublin, Ireland. This is where he was from. He
Beautiful.
was a professor, still is a professor at a great school. And we were both at this hotel conference, Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International Conference in New York. And we found ourselves going to the same breakouts and standing waiting for the same speakers. One was Seth Godin,
Yeah.
we wanted to get an autograph. And finally I looked at him and I said, "Who are you? I feel like you're following me around." We became fast friends in a couple of days. And eventually he said, he went back home. We stayed in touch. He said, "Much like our meeting, Steve,
Yeah.
only instead of come on to this great podcast that I do, Growth Ready," he said, "Why don't you come speak to my students and maybe a couple of associations in Dublin?" And I did. And
Mhm.
I thought, okay, this will be fun. Flew to Ireland, spent a couple of days speaking about the industry. And next thing I know, we're driving by in the evening to go to dinner. We passed the campus. And I said, I haven't been to college.
Yeah.
I had no college. And he said, "No, no, no." He said, "You should go." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm not going to give up 4 years of my life for an undergrad at this point. I'm okay." And he said, "No, but you might do well with a master's, you know?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't have an undergrad." He said, "Very often they will take a student who has work experience and has done really, really well for a master's program." And that just floored me. I'm like, "So I would have to come and go full time?" He's like, "Yeah, it's a full time program. We don't have distance learning."
Mhm.
And I thought, all right, maybe I'll give that a shot. I went home, put a package together of work product, my high school transcript, some letters of reference, an application and a check, and a letter of why I thought I would be a good student. And lo and behold, I got into not just that school, but two other schools in Europe. And
Wow.
I ended up moving to Dublin shortly thereafter and earning my Master's of Science in Hospitality Management. I've now got two postgrads in hospitality management, and that was the beginning, I would say, of my journey to full time, high end. Let's call it high end um, independent consulting.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm trying to take notes avidly as we speak here, just around the sort of nuggets, the nuggets of insight that people may be missing, just because the stories are so good. It's just like, I just want to hit the story, and it's just like, well, you might be missing some of these wonderful nuggets that come out of this. And firstly, the notion of being able to look across from someone and be like, I want to have the life that you have, and they go, well, I kind of want to have the life that you have, and how normal that is, right? I mean, we do in this day and age, especially. I mean, we're on social medias, we're looking around the world, we're looking on the internet, all this kind of stuff, and it's so easy to fall into that comparison mindset. And yet, to be flawed as you were, just by someone sort of looking at you and saying that to you, and then for them to be so almost reaffirming back to you when you say, well, I kind of want what you have, and then encourage it. Encourage it. Well, if you want it, come get it. Like, you can do it. Like, there's no reason to stop you. And I'm just curious if you can maybe even relate back to that version of yourself and think in that moment, like, what was it you feel that you felt at that time that was enough for you to say, yes, this is in fact a life that I not only want, but that I can create for myself?
Well, I think it was I wasn't completely happy being Magic Boy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the healthiest life, Steve.
Yeah.
It can be very good financially, and again, like you were talking about earlier, it's very public, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not the healthiest life. And I really wanted something where I had a little bit more normalcy, something that was more of a base rock. I also respected him so much as a professional and executive. Um, and others like him that I had met, and I always felt a bit like I lived in a carny environment, not to
Mm-hmm.
be negative about professional entertainers because they work their butts off, but I didn't feel like I wanted more. I wanted more respect. I wanted more opportunity. I wanted more. I was looking to raise my game, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, and that was the thing that I think gave me the comfort. The other part of that too was for me, Steve, I believed, and I still believe, when I went after the Magic, I knew if the wheels came off, I could come back to the Marines. I had 2 years of reserve duty, and if I wanted to flip back to active duty, maybe retire from the Marines, that was a possibility. When I realized that I was doing well with the Magic, going after this other opportunity to get into consulting, I always felt like, well, if I have to, I could jump back in, grab the costumes and some props, and work a booking or two, and I'll get
Right.
back into the Magic. I've always believed that
Mhm.
that I could do that.
Mm. Yeah, and it's one thing to acknowledge that, hey, I may be short on happiness doing what it is I'm doing, but it's another thing to get clarity around, firstly, what it is I want, like knowing what I want, but then secondly, saying, and hey, by going after this, you know, maybe worst case scenario is I just come back to the step that I'm in right now. And that in itself can be the reassurance we sometimes need just to go ahead and take that step that may otherwise seem daunting or just too great for us in those moments. And it sounds like the same thing happened again, even with the idea around getting that master's and just being able to say, well, as far as I'm concerned, you need education of undergrad to get that level of and to be informed of that, and to be in many ways brave enough to say, hey, I'm going to apply, and they may laugh me out of here, they may push me out of here, they may be what it is, but to go ahead and apply anyway, and lo and behold, not only do you get accepted, you get accepted by two other places, and it leads to even further education down the road. There just seems to be this consistent, and you're alluding to it, is that there's a willingness just to believe enough to take the first step, and to be accepting and open enough to knowing that the outcome may not be clear just yet, but that belief in itself is enough to commit in the first place.
It's true. And Steve, I don't want to make it seem easy. There were really hard days.
Mm-hmm.
Making the decision to live on peanut butter and jelly in many ways in LA in the beginning,
Yeah.
or making the decision to give up my professional life and move to Dublin with some maybe sketchy results. One of the first professors that I came in on was a great guy. First day we're introducing ourselves. I had not opened my mouth in this international program in Dublin, and he looked at me and he said, "You, I know you're the Yank." And I'm like, "I'm the Yank?" He goes, "Yeah, your teeth, they glow in the dark. You got to be my American lad." And I'm like, "Yeah." And right away he said, "I don't know that you're going to pass this course." And I said, "Why would you say that?" And he says, "Because you're supposed to have 4 years of accounting, college level accounting, before you get to my class, which was 2 years of master's level accounting for the hotel industry." And he said, "It's tough. More importantly, the difference between the European system and the American system of accountancy is different." And it was tough. I mean, it was tough to give everything up and move to Dublin on a limited budget, knowing that I'm going to be a full-time student. And it was tough to kind of catch up to everybody from an educational level standpoint, and overcome some of the biases as well of,
Mm.
well, of course you don't know this because you don't have an undergrad.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting game because two things happened. One is I learned that Irish culture is very direct, and the other is there are no secrets. And he let
Right.
everybody know I had no undergrad, right? First day of class.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting day. But I have
Yeah.
to tell you, it's been worth it. And I've enjoyed the process all the way through. And I think now's a good time to say I wouldn't be here on any level had it not been, most importantly, Steve, for the power of personal branding.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that I learned in the Marines. You know, we talked about seeing sameness. Here
Yep.
they have a very strong brand. You don't get to choose your haircut, your uniform, and many times your vocabulary. Even the Marines
Yep.
have their own vocabulary.
Yeah.
Um, to Magic Boy, where I could virtually wear anything, highlights in my hair, eye makeup, rhinestone tuxedos, to business consultant, conservative suits and dress shoes and ties and, a briefcase. I'd never
Mm-hmm.
carried a briefcase before in my life. So all of that were lessons each step of the way in what I would call the power of personal branding, and how my choices uh, even though they were small in the Marines, right? Behaviorally, from the getting up at zero dark 30 to run 20 miles or more before the day is done, Marines, to magician, magic boy, where I'd slept all day, 2 shows a night, 6 days a week, and then go out very late with kind of a raucous crowd,
Hmm.
to 9 to 5, constantly traveling, conservative hotel consultant. Each of those for me required a different brand thought, personal branding, and imagery that I needed to present to my audiences, my key stakeholders, my customers, my clients, that would move me forward, lift me up and push me forward in the industry.
Yeah.
And I think this is why I became quickly addicted to the concept of personal branding.
Hmm. Yeah, and something I'm hearing as you're speaking through this too is the need to make clear decisions that move you forwards, and how you're taking in both, and this is what I'm understanding just from what you're sharing, is that self-awareness, that authentic component that you want to wear, or you want to be seen, or you want to be received in some way, shape, or form that is true to you, but you can never forget the way in which you're being received, i.e., those key stakeholders, those audiences that you're interacting with. And I'm curious, just when I present it like that around just navigating the decisions that come with committing to a certain path of brand, where does someone start with with
So
this kind of work?
it's a great question, and it's one that I write about in my book, From Invisible to Icon: How to Become a Known Expert in Your Industry. Um, I think the important place to start is getting everybody to realize that today, if they have any hopes or dreams or goals in their lives, they already have a personal brand. They
Mm.
just and may not be aware of, but it's there. They just may not be developing and managing it to its highest value. I think that's the place. If they come to that realization and understand that they can do a better job of developing and managing that personal brand, A, that they have one, and B, begin to think about what is that.
Mm.
So, what I do is if we were to talk about this over a cup of coffee, I would tell you there's a few things I'd want you to think about. One is to begin with developing a set of keywords, and I usually tell people four is the perfect number. If I give you an example of four keywords, that these are words, let's say Steve. This is Steve. These are all the things that are Steve in terms of your value systems,
Hmm.
things that are important to you. You would write all those words down. And then I would ask you to choose four. It's no easy task to come up
Hmm.
with four keywords that mirror exactly who you. These are words that you would hope, Steve, others would use to describe you one day if
Sure.
they don't now, right?
Hmm.
But I can give you some examples. If I were to use the words compassionate, spiritual, intelligent, and genuine, a lot of people might think of Oprah Winfrey, in particular if I said this was a famous woman,
Hmm.
or if I used words like outrageous, sexy, chameleon, and brassy. They might think of Gaga or Madonna. Or
Hmm.
even lately, I can't believe this because I was thinking of Snoop Dogg. You could use another woman, organized, creative, anal, and intimidating. And a lot of people would think Martha Stewart.
Right.
Those are just good examples of how those keywords are used. But I think that's the first thing is to realize you do have a brand today, whether you realize it or not. You just may not be developing and managing it. And then sit down and think quietly, put together a list of keywords that you think really represent who you are in terms of your values and how you project yourself. Narrow that list down to four. I think that's hugely important. And if you don't know what they are, ask your family, friends, and colleagues because they'll describe your brand to you if you ask them to. You may not like all the answers, but they'll tell you where your brand is today.
I'm just thinking about, like, what was the last conversation like with my wife before I ask her this question? Just like I gotta get her in the right headspace before I get this kind of feedback. But I think this is a great place to start what I'm the way that I'm actually receiving it too is it's forcing me to look across my entire self. It's not. I'm not just, again, going back to that personal versus professional that I highlighted earlier on. This would be a really easy thing to fall into the trap of like, okay, what do I want my business to look like? And then put a whole bunch of words down based around the business that I
Yeah,
want to have. And it's like, well, that's not the exercise. The exercise is a true, well-rounded, almost audit of who are you, what's brought you to this point, what represents you. And I think that's what makes this so hard, because that is an endless pool of information. And to get that down to 4 words is
it's tough. It's
definitely tough.
tough. But
Mhm.
Steve, you nailed it, because when you said, I'm thinking back to my last conversation with my wife, your brand is the same brand with your family, your friends, your colleagues, your customers. It shouldn't change. It
Mhm.
should be authentic and genuine and you and based on your value systems. I mean, a great example is, even if you think about today, how, your brand packaging, we talk about that. And if you take some time to think about how you might be perceived, you and your hair or your eyes, meaning, do you wear glasses or contacts, your teeth, your nails, do you have tats and piercings, and if so, what are they, where are they, what the heck did they mean?
Right.
Obviously your clothing, accessories, shoes, even the home you live in and the car you drive, all shape perceptions about who you are. And I think a great example of that is, if you ask somebody, okay, I'm going to say a name, and just what comes to mind when I say Snoop Dogg or The Rock or Guy Fieri or RuPaul or Carrot Top, or almost anybody that has a strong, even Dog the Bounty Hunter
Right.
has a strong brand presence that has served him well. And I think so, brand packaging is part of it as well.
Hmm. Yeah. And I I love how you help folks get to the start line of just acknowledging from the beginning, like, hey, it's already there. Like, you're not actually starting with a blank piece of paper in many ways. Like, yes, you are in terms of this exercise with the words, but a great place to also start, like you said, if you're comfortable doing it, is just going around and conducting some personal surveys, like who these people in your life that know you best. Because while I joke about my wife, I know something like this, if I was to sit down with her, there wouldn't be anything she says that surprises me. It would all be like, this isn't news to me. Like, it will be information that confirms, yes, that sounds like me. That's the person that I see, and that's the person that I think I'm showing up as. Love it. And I'd be curious to know what her 4 words would be. But I think that's what gives you an element of safety with this, is that, you're asking people that are going to tell you something that is useful for you to know, and that isn't going to really shock you to in any way, shape, or form.
No, I agree. And it goes on that in the book, we go on to express, from there you go on to your brand statement, just
Mhm.
like any branding process. It's all about who you are and what you do and what you stand for. I think that's the essence of personal branding, and who you are is everything. I mean, it's your gender, your age, your ethnicity, your nationality, languages or accents that you have, your religion, your education, your sexual preference. It's all of those things that are who you are. Are you a parent?
Mhm.
Where did you grow up? All of those things. Married or single, like
Right.
you're talking about, Steve. It's also what you do, and it's not just your work. It is your hobbies, your talents, your social and civic organizations. Do you teach painting or piano, or you coach your little league for your kids or whatnot? And then it's about your leading attributes, and that's your values. Um, I think that's the leading attribute. Your strengths, your traits, your manners, your style. Are you someone who shows up on time, or are you always late?
Right.
Um, do all of that is really about, I think, your attributes. What's your style? How do you
Mhm.
how do you carry yourself? When we met, I was very impressed with the way you carried yourself. By the way,
Well, good, good,
very
good.
professional gentleman.
I'm glad.
But
I'm
from
so
there,
glad.
from there we go on to mission statement,
Yeah.
and essentially a brand plan that you can follow and move forward to. But if we're going to wrap up soon, which I know we are, I would imagine,
Yeah.
There's three words, Steve, that I close everything with always as it relates to personal branding.
Yeah.
And I think if someone goes through this process of, okay, I know I have a brand now. I want to go out and figure out what my four words are and talk to my people. I want to think about my brand packaging. I want to think about what my, those other key statements are in terms of who I am, what I do, and what I stand for, my leading attributes and all that. That's good. But at the end of the day, when you put it all together in a paragraph or two that is your mission statement for your brand, it's important to remember that once you've begun establishing that or continuing your personal brand, but in a more developed and from a management perspective, you're really managing that brand. Remember these three words. One is commitment. Commit fully to your personal brand and make sure that everything that you do in your life continually supports and confirms your brand. Uh, that's important. Finally, it's investment, or next, it's investment. Invest your time, your money, your energy in doing those things that will further promote and build on your personal brand. Keep learning. Go do education. Get involved in professional associations, right? Like National Speakers Association,
Sure.
social organizations, all of that. Get those. Keep reading those books, get those certifications and designations, all of those things. And then finally, it's about consistency. This is the most important thing in the world. Once you've established your brand, it's important to remember that off-brand behavior or things that you might do or wear or whatnot can really erode trust in your personal brand. We're all familiar with celebrities whose off-brand behavior has ruined them
Yeah.
for a long time. We don't even need to mention names. We can all think of some.
Yeah.
But that's the idea.
Yeah.
And
I love those three words in to capture the work that you do and the essence of the book too, which I that information will be available in the show notes for the episode for anybody who's interested, because I have to assume there's even more fabulous stories in addition to the ones we've already received in this discussion. But something that you've alluded to here with the commitment, investment, and then the consistency is you've given us the roadmap for how to do, in many ways, what you've been able to do with your life, which is that of build a level of belief, towards the brand. Because again, if you don't commit fully, if you don't invest your time and you're not consistent, that belief will never come. It will never happen, and you will always be questioning the brand and going back to the drawing board before you've really ever given it the true opportunity to see whether it's valid, whether it's true. And so I think those three words in themselves really resonate just with your entire outlook in terms of the stories and the way in which you've built this career that you've shared with us today.
I appreciate that. It is from a brand perspective, it is about building that value and that trust. I always use the example of you can pay $4 for a pound of Hershey's Kisses or $40 for a box of Godiva. Same pound of chocolate. It just
Mhm.
feels different, tastes different. It's the brand.
Yeah.
No one puts a bowl of Godiva chocolates out on their desk. Um, and if you think about managing your brand, that's it right there. It's building trust and value long
Yeah.
term,
Yeah.
surrounding yourself the way that you have, Steve.
I appreciate that, John. And had I known, well, I'm just glad that I was able to provide the impression that I did, now knowing who it is you are and what you do. And I think that in itself is probably an entire podcast, but separately is like, always be aware of who you might be saying hello to.
Sure.
But at the same time, I just want to really appreciate how you've not only shared your insights today, how you're able to even bring this into something it's in many ways we see it all the time in the workplace with the consistency of the leader. I myself, when you think about the brand of the executives that I do coaching with, it comes up a lot, is that when they notice themselves having inconsistent behaviors, how that then affects those that they are responsible for and those that they are working alongside of. And I think we can all relate to that. And if it takes looking at this from a brand perspective to help us get there, then that's only going to serve us. It's only going to be helpful for us. But John, listen, brother, we could keep going, and I will more than likely have to find a reason to bring you back on down the road, because you already shared with me you're thinking about another book down the road, and hey, maybe when that book comes out, we revisit whatever you're talking about that time. But I would love to just allow you to share with our listeners here, if they are looking for the book, even though we'll have some information in the show notes, where might we go for that? And hey, if there's any other ways that we can reach out and engage with you, what might those look like too?
Sir, the book is called From Invisible to Icon, How to Become a Known Expert in Your Industry. And it's published by Post Hill Press, distributed by Simon & Schuster. So it's available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy your books, it's available. Just go in and look for it, or hopefully order it if necessary.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, John, listen, again, appreciate the time. Just the generosity of insight has been absolutely phenomenal. And I knew this could be a good conversation, and you've completely over-delivered. So I appreciate that. And I know our listeners will appreciate it too. So thanks again for the time, brother.
Thank you. And I hope you live forever. And I hope anyone listening to this lives forever. Cheers.
And my thanks again to John for joining us on the show. Let's talk about branding, people. That's what John brought us to over the course of that episode. His story is palpable in terms of just being filled with twists and turns and all sorts of first-time experiences and transitional periods where you go from one extreme to another in terms of whether it be where he was living or what he was doing for a living, all these kind of things. What an incredible journey he's been on throughout his life. But to go to the theme of branding, which is what he very much excels and is an expert in today, I'm curious, are you aware of the brand that you show up with every single day? What sort of work are you doing around just simply building that self-awareness? When we look at some of the key elements of a personal brand, firstly, are you committed fully to who you are and how you're showing up? Are you investing the amount of time necessary to put that brand out there? Because finally, we want to be as consistent about that brand as well. Whether you want it or not, you have a personal brand. And the fact of the matter is, whether you're someone that has a business, has a career, is just a father, a mother, whether you're someone who's in a position in life that seems to be one of excellence versus one of amateurism, it doesn't matter where you are in your journey and what position that you have. You show up daily a certain way, and therefore you have a personal brand, and people are making a decision daily whether or not to invest in that brand, i.e., they're making a decision to whether or not they want to invest in you. So I encourage you to take that time and just simply build a self-awareness. How do you show up? What does a consistent version of you look like? Do people know what they're getting from you every time you walk into a room? Or are they just sitting there anxiously wondering who the heck it is that's going to show up in terms of the version of you that day? Strive for consistency. But most importantly, just build a self-awareness. Know who you are and know how you show up. I guarantee you, by simply getting better at that level of awareness, improving how you see yourself, you'll become more cognizant of how you show up, and likely you will strive to show up at more consistent, more impactful levels each and every day. Again, my thanks to John for joining us on the show. My thanks to you, as always, for joining and listening. You don't have to listen to this show, but you choose to, and for that, I am always grateful. But now that you've done it, please take the time to go ahead and share the episode with somebody else in your world, someone that you know is going to love the story that you've just heard, that's going to appreciate the insights that you've just heard, and who you know is in that position of growth, and they're looking for that next step of readiness in terms of what it means for them to go to that next level within their life. Go ahead and share the show, subscribe to the show, and don't forget to rate the show as well. Help us become more available and accessible to those far outside of our personal networks. I appreciate you, and I wish you nothing but the best and good luck in anything and everything that you're doing currently. And I look forward to speaking with you again very soon. Bye for now. Thanks again to Scribe for sponsoring the episode, and remember to head to scribehow.com to automatically turn your processes into a step-by-step guide in seconds. So stop answering the same repetitive questions and work 15 times faster by heading to scribehow.com and start working faster today.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.